Welcome back to the Aussie Shed, ladies and gentlemen. The time has come to reinstall the rear cradle back in the Project Fairlady. So what I've done, folks, I've made up a little table to mount the unit on top of my gearbox jack down here, so that I can do it on my own, lift it up, you know, no dramas, just trying to locate everything, because it is a very heavy unit. And it might take just a little bit of fiddling around. I'd hate to be trying to hold this thing up under a car or anything like that. So, let's get into it. Right, folks, I found the first little issue here, and it relates to the 10mm roll center correction that's incorporated into the bushes by turning them up the way I have, and I know that's quite a common feature amongst quite a few of the bushing brands, but I'll show you the issue that you face by doing that with the Z32. So I'll just pop the camera off and I'll give you a bit of a look. Alright, so this is the attachment point for the traction arm on the right hand side of the vehicle, driver's side here in Australia, passenger side in the US, and you can see that the clearance on the top here has been reduced to literally nothing. There's about 1.5 millimeters of clearance on that top corner there between the traction arm mounting point and the chassis rail, because we've lost 10mm because of, you know, taking that out of the bushings on the top. The traction arm on the other side doesn't have a problem. I've been over the whole unit. There doesn't seem to be anything else. A lot of the arm mounting points have been pushed up a bit closer, but none of them have any clearance problems that are going to be an issue other than this one. So I'm going to have to drop the rear cradle back down and see what I can do with this. I may just tap a slight recess into the chassis rail there, just with a ball peen hammer or something, you know, and maybe do something to that top corner. It's a very small area that needs adjustment, but nonetheless, I'm at this stage, like, it's never going to be easier than it is now to just kind of make a little adjustment to it. Look, honestly, if I've got 5mm of clearance, I'd be happy with that. You know, I think that's all I need. Really, the issue is that if something hits the cradle really hard from underneath, or even just your drive wheels, if the car's driven up really hard from underneath the rear wheels, there's a possibility that the bushings will compress and this will actually hit the chassis rail there. And if that's the case, it'll just make one hell of a noise. And if it becomes something that happens a bit, you'll absolutely be hating the thing. So now's the time to address it, folks. And that's what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to quickly pull this whole rear cradle assembly back down. Fortunately, as you saw from installing it, it's sitting on a nice hydraulic lift, so it's not a big issue. So I won't bother filming that, but I will come back straight away and show you the result of what I've done. So I'll see you in a second. Alright, folks, that's done now. As you can see, just up in there, I've ground a little bit off the corner of the bracket, and I have just used a ball peen hammer, and I've just slightly recessed directly above it. So I have a good 5 to 7mm clearance, depending on sort of how you look at it, up in there now. So I'm quite confident that that's no longer going to be an issue. Alright, let's have a look at this whole assembly now, eh? And there it is, folks, she's in. The only other issue I had was these couple of little donuts that I made up for the bracket that goes from the front rear cradle mount back into the frame rails on both sides. These are the original pieces I had. They were about 1.5 mm shy of being the right size. They were sort of, you know, flopping around in there. No idea what I did there, but I just quickly made up a couple of new ones, no big deal. So now she's finally in for good. So what I'm about to do is just torque up all the main anchor points up to factory spec, and then I guess it's time to start building this assembly out with all the rebuilt components that we've got sitting on the shelf ready to go. Alright, well we might as well start with the lower control arm for this side. You probably remember the lower control arms that we rebuilt in a previous video. We've got our spherical bushers in here, replacement of the original rubber bushers. We've got the Moog lower ball joint on the back here that I machined the spacer up. You can see that guy sitting in there. Where are we? Yep, we're all looking pretty good, folks, so I think we better just throw this guy in. And I've also cleaned up the OE plastic, I don't know, pieces on there. Don't know what they're really meant to be for, but I cleaned them up and put them back on anyway, so, you know, as per OEM. Obviously you can see here there's a little piece that's been cut out to facilitate the nipple to grease the ball joint. The OE ball joint was sealed, so we didn't need that, so you need to cut out a little bit there. But she's all good, folks. Always handy for things like this, folks. This is just a center punch that I made out of a bit of hex shaft with a long taper on it. You know, long tapers are awesome for lining things up. You can just kind of start it and wiggle the thing and just sort of push your tapered piece in, and it'll center it. We used to call these podgers. I don't know what people refer to them as nowadays, but that's what we used to call them anyway. Very handy when you're putting stuff like this together. Beautiful. It's always good to get into the glory stages, folks, which is where I am with the rear end of this car at the moment. I'm right in the middle of the glory spot. Nice new clean parts. You don't get dirty, you don't need gloves, everything you're handling is new, and it just looks sweet. It kind of makes it all worthwhile, folks, when you get to this point with something. That being said, the front end of the Fairlady is still a piece of shit, so I've only got more of the crap to look forward to, but I'm going to enjoy the glory while it lasts. Righto, next thing I think I might do is the traction arm that goes up onto here. So we'll just take this bolt out. Now with any of these adjustable arms, folks, you have to line them up with your OEM length to begin with before you go getting wheel alignments and stuff done. I always find it's best to go to an OEM length. We'll just head over to my makeshift bench at the back of the vehicle here, and I'll just give you a run through that process. So what we have here is our OE traction arm and the new adjustable arm. And what you do, folks, you just, you know, use anything, whether it's a bolt or a piece of rod or anything, to line the OEM arms up. If you don't have anything, you kind of got to measure it, but measuring really sucks when you're trying to do something like this. You know, you can pretty much always find a couple of bolts that's going to fit through to help you line everything up. And then you've just got to work your adjuster lengths so that you don't exceed any of the recommendations by the manufacturer of the arm. I've got a couple of drawings here that I've been going off just to tell me how much I need on a certain adjuster and how much you need on the other, because they do adjust in sort of two stages. You know, you've got your rod end that adjusts out of the center of your other adjuster that goes into the arm. So as long as you don't exceed any of the specs, you're looking pretty good. As you can see, that's been adjusted there, that's ready to go in. I am using the rubber dust sleeve with these arms, just because it's a street vehicle that's going to be encountering, you know, who knows, all sorts of grit and crap in there. So we'll take this over, we'll throw it on. So we'll just slip these rods out now, folks. And we know that our arm is pretty much the right length. I've done the adjuster up here so that the arm's reasonably tight, so it should stay in that length until we mount the hub on it, you know. Righto, let's go back over to the car. And here we go, this should be it right here. Oh, look at that, easy fit. Easy fit. And you can see, folks, that little bit of a, you know, a little bit of a sort of adjustment that we had to make earlier in this position isn't affecting anything now. There's still clearance for the arm. It's not like the arm had any chance of fouling. I only really did what I did just so that there was, you know, no chance of the rear cradle being impacted and then being driven up into this chassis, so that if there is movement, there's no chance of it rubbing or vibrating against the chassis there. That's looking pretty good. Particularly nice to be assembling everything with the nice new gold passivated nuts and bolts that we did in an earlier video there, folks. It's always nice to work with nice clean stuff, eh? Alright, so I think we'll do the upper control arm next. Obviously it's the same deal with your upper arms, folks. You've got to adjust those to your factory spec. This is normally the point here where you adjust the camber with the upper arms, and you can see that this is a lockout arrangement that I have here. These washers lock it in position so there's no movement, you know, able to happen with this here. You can, I think you can probably get by just using the standard ones, but they are sort of prone to movement, particularly if you've got your arms all locked up, and you know, you don't need adjustment in this spot anymore. Best thing we always find, anything like this, regardless of the vehicle, just get a lockout kit for it, or make a lockout kit. It's basically just a bolt and a couple of thick washers, you know, and you know, you'll be very glad that you did. Once again, I'm using the rubber boots on these things, just as I say, because it is a street car. This arm obviously can fit on either way, you know, with the bar either to the front side or the back side. I'm just choosing to fit it on this way, folks. Just my own preference. I just think from the back, which is the only way you're sort of seeing to the rear suspension, I just think from the back it looks a little bit more natural, you know. Whereas if you fit it in on this side, it just sort of looks a bit odd. Just an opinion. Well, they all look pretty good. I think I might go inside and have a cup of coffee, folks, and then think about what I'm going to fit on there next. See you in a bit. Right, folks, the axles are in now, as you can see. I'm about to throw a hub on this side. I'll just doing a little bit of preparation here. I'm just using some Honda M77 assembly paste just on the this section here on the axles. Not something that it says to do in the factory service manual or anything, but this is, I sort of come from the 370Z community, guys, and this is something that has been pretty sort of commonplace in 370Z world, and they're basically the same axle as the 370Z, the 230 axles, or not the same axle, but they're the same sort of a configuration. And this was part of a what was it, a recall sort of thing with a clicking axle thing. It's a really good thing anyway. It really helps the axle and the hub kind of just integrate together better. Hard to explain really, but it's all laid out in the 370Z factory service manual. You're probably thinking, oh, Trevor, you're an idiot, that's got nothing to do with Z32s. But yeah, I've got all the stuff from using it on 370Z, so I'm going to do the same thing on this, guys, just because it's a good thing. A little bit of grease on the splines too, folks. Not a huge amount, just enough to, you know, be on there without having a heat. Don't have it sort of really caked into the grooves or anything. Just sort of push it in as hard as you can with your finger, just so that it's greased up. Like I say, you don't want heaps in there, but you do want a little bit on the edge of that to help the seal slide over. There is grease on the seal, the factory seal. When you buy it for here, it sort of comes pre-greased. There's a ton of grease in it, which is pretty rare that you get something like that all greased up. But that's pretty sweet. I think we should be right to throw the hub on there now. Alright, so we'll slip him on the axle and then sort of drop it down into the ball joint, I think. Alright, that'll sit there. I'll just pull him up onto the coilover next. It's all kind of hidden from view, folks. Now there's not a lot you can really see, I guess. So I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll get all the bolts in on all the arms, and I'll come back when I'm ready to start reassembling the brakes and everything like that. So I'll turn the camera off, guys, just because you can't see jack shit in behind there. So I'll be back when all the arms and everything are hooked up. Alright folks, all our arms are on now, everything's attached, we're all looking pretty good. The only thing I haven't got is the high cast delete arms on at the moment, so I've just got to do a little bit of work to those. But I'm at the point where I'm about to start reassembling the handbrake mechanism. I guess you can probably see a little bit of it, but handbrake mechanisms can be a little bit tricky. I would suggest when you disassemble anything like this, you take lots of photos of it with your cell phone. There are a few little bits and pieces you do have to grease certain areas. This is your layout in the factory service manual. These are the points that you need to grease there. There's what have we got, 6 of them. One of them is this center pin that the pads kind of go up against, and the others are these little raised edges that you can see like this, that are all around the backing plate there. If you sort of follow the diagram, you should be pretty right. There's no real explanation in the factory service manual of how to reassemble it. They sort of roughly show how to disassemble it, and then it's just a reversal of the removal type of thing, but it's very, very basic. And I can certainly see how, if you haven't done this before, you could get really lost with it. It is a fairly simple mechanism, but like I say, like anything, if you're not familiar with it, it's something that can really be a bit perplexing, and being a handbrake, you don't want it to fail when you need it the most. So yeah, you're only going to see little bits and pieces, folks. I'll leave the camera where it is, but you're probably not going to sort of catch all of it. So we'll see. I might just edit the whole lot out, and or I'll just speed it up, and you can, if there's anything that you catch, you can always slow it down and just go, oh yeah, I can see what he did there. Rightio. Actually, I'll blab on for a little bit more, folks. This is just white lithium grease that I'm using. It's what they sort of recommend for a lot of brake stuff. Oh yeah, you've probably seen me use it before on bits and pieces. But you've got to be careful and only grease where it sort of tells you to. These pads here are pretty important to do. They stop your brake shoes from kind of dragging against the back cover there. In these spots, it's pretty obvious where to put it. You can see all the raised sections that your brake shoes run off. Alright, that's got those guys all done. And I'm actually reusing all the old brake hardware, folks. It came up pretty good. You never really have that much wear on all your handbrake stuff because it's not actually used for the brakes for the vehicle. It's just purely for your handbrake. So you get a hell of a lot of life out of these brake shoes on this rear sort of mechanism setup. So yeah, just a lot of cleaning up. And when I finish, I've already cleaned up these friction surfaces quite a bit, but I'll put it all together and finish assembling it. But before it actually comes time to use the vehicle, I'll take the discs back off and I'll clean them with brake cleaner. I'll re-clean all this with brake cleaner and everything. So that's what's going on, folks. If you think, oh, he hasn't cleaned anything, it's like, yeah, I'll do all that later. So this is just a cable I'm hooking in here, folks. It's a little bit tricky to get in. Alright, we'll just let that sit there for the moment. So this is the top guide, folks. It's you know, you can see sort of the shape of it there. It's got a little bit that hangs down there. That goes down in the downward fashion, and that holds your brake shoes on. Well, this has to go on before the spring that holds all this together, which I'm about to put on there now. I find a little pair of vice grips really handy for doing this sort of stuff, folks. So that locks in there, and that just fell off. You do need like 6 pairs of hands doing this often, folks. Anyway, let's get that guy on there. I'll throw one of these pins in now, folks. This locks the brake shoe back against the backing plate there, to kind of stop this sort of a setup going on here. They're a little bit of a pain in the bum, like all this sort of stuff is. Very fiddly. The camera's actually where I'd like to put my head, folks, to get this in. There we go. It just sort of pushes in and then turns, folks. But they are a little bit of a pain in the bum to do. Alrighty, so that's most of that side one done. Now this guy's sort of part of the return spring mechanism for the top. It has a spring. It's a little bit different shape either end, you can see there. And this section here that sort of forms a fork, it goes towards your brake caliper when you put that in. So it sort of just slips in across the top here. And get it in like so. Now we can start on this shoe, folks, our front shoe. So this guy, you just got to sort of line it up. I can't really move the camera to show you, folks, but you've just, that little fork area that I just showed where the spring is, it has to sort of slot into this. Then we'll just pull this back over and lock it onto the top, put the pin through the side, and then we'll finish the bottom of the mechanism off. Oh. Would help if I went in the right hole. Nothing worse than accidentally slipping in the wrong hole, is there, folks? I tell ya. Alright, so that's that guy. We'll put another pin in it. We are starting to get there, folks. Now to finish this next section off, I'll just raise the vehicle up a bit, folks, because we're going to be working down the bottom here, and you know, I've either got to crouch or, you know, this is why you have a hoist, folks, so instead of crouching and hurting your back, you can just lift the bloody car up. So only 2 more pieces to go, folks. We've got the adjuster that goes on the bottom and the spring that pulls the shoes in together down there, you know, that sort of holds this adjuster in. You do have to grease this adjuster, so you got to put a little bit of grease inside there, and this threaded section you also have to grease that. So I'll just grease those again now with a bit of lithium grease, just so that you've got, you know, nice free movement with your adjuster, so it's not going to bind up. Then we'll throw the spring on. And with this little unit, folks, I generally run the threaded piece towards the front of the vehicle, you know, It just seems to sort of center it better on this particular arrangement. But really, it sort of centers pretty well. It really doesn't matter that much, you know, but if you're going to put them one way, you might as well just work out a way to, you know, that you're sort of happy with. So, it's a little bit tricky to do this without it all sort of falling to pieces on you guys. Let me get the spring on first. In. I've done it, folks. I think I've done it. There we go. Yep, beautiful. So the spring actually sort of sits between the teeth on this as well, so that when you roll it, it kind of locks it works sort of like a lock nut, the spring does. It drops down in between the slots. It stops the thing sort of adjusting itself when you don't want it to. So that's done, folks, other than adjusting, but we need to put the rotor on to adjust that. So I think we might do that. That sort of sounds interesting, doesn't it? Throwing the rotor and caliper on. Woohoo! And there we go. Like I say, folks, I am going to clean all that up again before this is actually put into service. But for now, should just go straight on. And this really is the benefit of using the 370Z brake conversion, folks. These brake rotors go straight on. This handbrake hub section in this rotor is exactly the same size and layout as the smaller rotors on your Z32. So it just makes sense, you know, to use these rotors and everything in this situation. And they are, you know, very, very large compared to your standard rotors. Look at that. I think we can even throw a caliper on. Alright, there we go. I'll do the other side. I'll adjust the handbrake mechanism on both sides, and we'll have a bit of a look at the overall thing, folks, and I'll run you over everything, and I'll tell you what's still to do and why, and, you know, just sort of give you a bit of a look at the overall thing, how it's turned out. And I must say I'm pretty happy with it all. So I'll do the other side, folks, and then I'll come back. So I'll see you in a second. And that's her, folks. That's the majority of the work done on the back end at the moment now. So as you can see, we now have both our 370Z rotors and calipers on that side. On that side, I also have a functioning handbrake now. They're all adjusted up, and the handbrake is working absolutely fine. Stuff that's still left to do. Oh, the high-cast lockout arms aren't done yet. I've got a couple of things to do with them. I'm thinking about replacing the bushes. I've got to repair one of the brackets. So that's still not done. The rear sway bar isn't done. You can see the new CAD plated mounts and everything are there for it. But I'm going to get the rear sway bar powder coated along with the front sway bar powder coated. When I move into the front, which is going to be very soon, all the stuff that I strip out of there, I'm going to have a big heap of stuff to go to the powder coaters. So it's all just sort of going to go in with all that. So yeah, I could paint it, but I've got to go to the powder coaters anyway. I might as well just get as much stuff done at once as I can. On the sway bar still, I'm using adjustable ends here. They're not a bad sort of thing, so you can, they're just a basic sort of a setup which goes along with this type of rear sway bar, but it does allow you to change the length to sort of tune your suspension to make sure you're not putting, you know, more stress on your bar on one side or the other, whereas your factory upright piece here is fixed on both ends, whereas this, you know, you can slide this up or down sort of on that end there. So that's, you know, that's a good thing. What else is still to do up here? I've got to put some fluid in the diff. Obviously I've got to do some sort of a rough alignment on the thing as well before sort of too long, just for being able to push the thing around. But typically with that, I need to get these high cast lockout arms done before I can even think about doing sort of a rough alignment on it here. I've got to grease the rear ball joints. They're sitting there, no grease in them. What else is there? Roughly set the height with the coilovers, so I've got no idea where they are since I rebuilt the coilovers. They could be bloody anywhere. It's looking pretty good, folks. It's taken a lot of work to get to this point of you know, having everything looking so good. Where are we? Still a little bit of work with the fuel system. I haven't been able to get the thing up and down because of the overbalancing factor with having no rear axle assembly in it. So I haven't done much on these fuel lines that run off here. Now that I can move the thing up and down, I can start running them into the front and working out where my fuel pressure regulator is going to go and all that sort of stuff. This vacuum line here for the evap system, it's got to be pulled out and painted to match the brake lines. I probably mentioned that, but I have actually painted all the brake lines on the car. They've all been stripped off, cleaned out and painted, along with, as you know, all the nuts and bolts and everything have been cad plated. There's our bush there that we made earlier. All of the rear cradle mounts have worked since I sort of modified them. You can see this is the Delrin spacer that I made up here to take up that you know, that sort of ugly piece that was left because of this original section not going up inside the bush. I'm really glad I made that, because that would have just looked like a friggin' pair of dog's balls. So happy with that, and as you can see, there's no spacer required for where it goes back onto the frame rail here. All the heights and everything worked out really good. The bush compressors, you know, a couple of mil at least sort of thing, so that's all held in there really tight. And on the back bush here, I went with the sort of Mark 1 version of my modification, which was putting a 10 mil Delrin spacer between the two halves of the bush and extending the sleeve 10 mil, just because I don't have to use the factory sort of mount cover thing here, just because, you know, there's no real reason for it. I can just use this sort of supplied flat washer, which I have painted in Pour 15 because they had a really poor finish on them when I got them. See all the adjustable arms in there now. That's all looking sort of very sweet. I'm very happy with the brake conversion, folks. It just looks, you know, it really looks factory now. Very, very happy with it. I don't have rear brake lines. That's another thing I have to sort of sort out, but that's not going to be sort of too big a deal. I'm sure I can come up with something there. What else is there? It's pretty much it, folks. You can see the temperature sensors connected in now, and it sort of wires up through with the ethanol content analyzer is this other wire up here, and they follow through with the what's that one? Oh, that's your speed sensor wire off the diff there. They sort of go through that grommet and up into the sort of boot area. But I think that's just most of it for this whole rear axle assembly, folks. It's looking pretty good. Always hard to film black stuff, folks. It really doesn't do it justice. It probably looks alright on camera, but it really, really looks impressive in person. Really, really does. Alright, folks, so we might leave this video here. It's all looking pretty good. Very happy with how it all turned out. A lot of work, but, you know, you see what you get for it. You get something that's really, really good, you know. We've gone from a complete rear end on this car that was worn out. Everything was worn out, as you would have seen if you've been watching the series. You know, everything here has either been replaced, rebuilt, renewed, repainted, whatever. And next, I'm about to start on the front section, folks. So it's going to be motor out fairly soon, front suspension and everything off, transmission out, and then back to where we started here. Paint the floor pan in the very front area, you know, painting the engine bay and all that sort of stuff. I don't know whether I will, I'll probably do both at the same time. I'll probably pull the motor down and you know, and start prepping and painting at the same time. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. I don't have any plans set in stone for it, but it'll just sort of happen. So I hope you liked the video, folks. I hope you've liked the whole sort of series so far on rebuilding this entire rear axle assembly of the car and all the work on the floor pan and all that kind of stuff. And if you did like it, folks, remember to subscribe to the channel, give the videos a thumbs up, tell your mates if anyone's interested in Z32s, so you've got to check out the Aussie Shed. If you're interested in Z32s, it's the place to be. As always, folks, I'll bloody well see yous on the next one. Cheers.